All right, welcome everyone to the June Apple iPhone developer meetup in Austin. And my name is David Olish. I'm the iOS lead at Jackrabbit Mobile. And today we have Travis from Taiwan. He came up from Houston to talk about context on mobile. And his presentation is called Mapping the Contextual Ecosystem. So we're going to have Travis talk, give his presentation, and then he'll have time for question and answers, and then we'll see how much time we have left after that, and possibly do some networking or discussion about what's coming up at WWDC. So I'll let Travis get started.
So how many people got lucky enough to get a ticket for WW next week? Okay. I was surprised. We actually had 5 people at Taiwan. You know, it's like everybody jumps in just to see, you know, hopefully one of us will get picked. And I think last year we had 1, and the year before that I think it was just 1 or something like that. And this year we had 5 of us. Okay, so. All right, so hi, I'm Travis. I'm the Director of Engineering over at Taiwan. And well, since we're kind of new into the Austin space, about 1.5 years now. I kind of start out with, who is Taiwan? Taiwan started in 2008. We're based out of Houston. We are a mobile and web consulting company, primarily focusing in the enterprise space. So we work to bring the experience that you expect in iOS into the enterprise world, which is really kind of interesting because a lot of enterprise software, to be honest with you, really sucks. We're one of the fastest growing companies in Houston. We got started about right after the App Store launched. We're about 40% year over year. We have about 60 people right now. Most in Houston area. We have an office here in Austin that's design and research focused. So, raise your hand. Unfortunately, Claire's the only one who made it out so far. I have others that are supposed to be coming, but Jared is who runs the Austin office. He unfortunately we had to do a quick trip, and he's in Houston tonight, and I'm here. So think of me taller and thinner and more designery, and that's Jared. So the majority of our staff is in Houston. We do have some staff in Argentina, in the UK, Southeast Asia, and we primarily are mobile focused. We're primarily iOS, but we also do some Android, we do some Xamarin, we do some backend work that was usually in Ruby on Rails, and then with Ember.js is kind of our front end technology stack. Since we are in Houston, we do work with a lot of oil and gas. We do work with a lot of enterprise. And it's really kind of basically, our mission is kind of to unlock the enterprise worker from their desk and get them out into the mobile experience. And we have a user-centered design culture, which merely means that we are interested in going out into the field, going out with the people that are going to be using the applications, understand what they're doing. We have about 2,000 hours in the field doing user research, riding along with sales guys that are going back and forth to restaurants trying to sell food, going around with field workers that are managing oil wells and stuff like that. So we can understand what their problems are when we're building this mobile application. Because it's not just about what the guys up in the tower back in downtown Houston think the field workers need. It's what the field workers do actually need. A little bit about myself. Like I said, I'm Director of Engineering. My focus and interest is really in artificial intelligence and robotics. I saw Star Wars when I was 6 and said, I want R2-D2 to be my friend, and basically was interested in career path and technology ever since. I started doing iOS development in 2008, right after the first SDKs came out. Co-founded the Houston area NS Coder Night, and was doing .NET development until about 2010 when the iPad came out, and I was doing .NET development at Thomson Reuters, writing fun XML parsing algorithms, and my boss walks into my cube and says, "Hey, you still doing that iOS stuff on the side?" I said, "Yep." He's like, "Great. We just got money to do an iPad application. You're the only one in the office who knows how to do it. You're in charge." He turns around and walks out. And so I was the lead developer on one of Thomson Reuters' first iPad applications. They had no idea what to do with mobile. They kind of did a mini startup within Thomson Reuters, which I thought was really kind of innovative, and basically gave a bunch of departments some money and said, "Go build something. Demo it for the shareholders in 3 months and have it in the store in 6 months, and let's see what happens." And we, of course, were building an application that was going to be used by the board of directors. And so instead of having 3 months to do a demo, we had 3 months to get it in the store because the board of directors, they wanted to use it, not just see a demo of it. So I worked at Thomson Reuters for about 3 years. They figured out what to do with mobile and said, "Cool, we're going to consolidate all of our mobile developers in Eagan, Minnesota." I'm a Houston boy, born and raised, and said, "I don't want to go to Minnesota, it snows there." And they said, "Okay, you can go back to .NET stuff." And Chai1 came a-calling, and I joined Chai1 in 2012. Worked on a couple of different applications with them, and then moved into the director of engineering role in 2013. So at Chai1, what we're really kind of interested in is the art of the possible, not just what we can build now, but what we can build later and what's coming with the technology that we have, and trying to figure out, based off the technology we have, where are the trends, where are things going. This is going to be a very high-level talk. I thought about trying to get into the weeds and some code, and then realized that, WWDC is next week, and after next week, we're going to have a completely new set of weeds to worry about. And so I decided, okay, let's keep this a little bit more high-level. But it's at the end of this, I do have some ideas of what Chai1 is really hoping to hear at WWDC. Half of the stuff that I really want to hear has been already rumored to be confirmed because 9to5Mac has awesome rumor mongering. So hopefully something cool comes out of that. But we're really interested in the technology as it's changing because technology always changes. Back in the beginning, we had centralized systems. We had large systems. We had these big computers that filled up rooms. We had big computers that were giant towers. We had this master control programming ruling everything we do. And technology improved, and things got smaller and more personal. And as they got improved some more, it got even more personal. And more until 2007, Steve Jobs stood up on stage and held up a tiny brick of silicone and said, "Hey guys, this is the future. This is a computer now." And a lot of people at the time said, "Wow, we've really kind of revolutionized some stuff," but we didn't quite. I don't think everybody in 2007, when he first did that, really realized what things were going to be like today. But because apps have gotten extremely personal now. And with the beauty of the iPhone and then the Android and any tablet, any phone that is primarily a touchscreen display, is that the application becomes the device. And so the application and experiencing and working with that application is a very personal thing. So what we end up with is a plethora of applications that do the same thing, but in different ways, so that it's geared specifically towards what you're interested in and how you want to interact with something. And there are tons and tons and tons of just to-do list applications. And we have that because how I want to manage my to-do list is different from how you want to use your to-do list, and how it's different than you want to use yours. And we don't have to use one to-do list anymore. If I don't like one, I can just go look in the store and grab another one, which is great. But now we're overwhelmed with applications. I have about 300 applications on my phone, and that's a small number for a lot of people. I know there's some of the people that we work with that have 1,000 or more applications on their phone. And every application they have is something that they use at some point. There might be a handful that they're using every single day, but there's always that one time where you need that one application that you haven't used in 6 months, but you still have it on your phone for that one time when you need it. And it's really overwhelming. And of course now, things have gotten even more personal. Because we have them on our watch. So not only is it something in our pocket that we're carrying around with us every day, it's something that is on our wrist, tapping at us constantly. You notice my wrist is still bare because I haven't quite jumped in yet, but I see a lot of you have, which is really cool. So you kind of understand what I'm saying. There's a lot of options out there now. Everybody's trying to do a wrist app, whether it makes sense or not. I had a Casio calculator watch when I was a kid, and it was great because I could do math on my watch. And there's calculator apps that you can get for your watch now, but is that really where I need to do math? So we're still learning a lot. It's easy to get overwhelmed, and so as app developers, what does that mean? How can we differentiate ourselves and still be important in the industry? How can we make sure that people use the to-do list app that I wrote instead of the to-do list app that he wrote, or the to-do list app that she wrote? How can we make sure that of all of those 1,000 apps that we have on our phone, that when the user needs that one app that one time, that it's our app that they pick of those 1,000 apps? Basically, how can we build apps smarter? So I want to kind of get more concrete with this and look at an example. And to do something completely different, we're not going to look at an example that's an app example. We're going to look at a lamp. This is a lamp. Specifically, this is a dumb lamp. So how does this work? How do you use this lamp? To install it, you plug it in. To turn it on, you flip a switch. To turn it off, you flip the switch again. That's it. Easy. Everybody can do this. You don't need a manual. It works across all ages. It works across all nationalities. You don't have to worry about localization for a simple on and off switch. But dumb is boring. And we're always interested in something more interesting, so we built smart lamps. Okay, so what is this? What's a smart lamp? And this in particular is a Philips Hue, so you can control it, you can change the lighting that it has. I have a friend that on Saturdays, he turns his Philips Hue to purple because he's watching LSU, and on Sundays, he turns it to blue, red and blue, because he's watching the Texans. And that's the extent of my understanding of sports, so don't ask any questions of that in Q&A. But how do we use a smart lamp? Well, to install it, you plug it in. So far, so good. But then you have to decide what mobile device you want to control it with. So you pick the right phone, whether it's your phone or whether it's your wife's phone, or if you're a developer like us, you might have multiple phones to choose from. And then you have to download the app, and you have to open the app, and then you have to figure out how to use the app, because let's be honest, a lot of the apps by smart lamp people, these guys are hardware guys. Philips builds light bulbs. They don't necessarily know a lot about software design, so at least the first versions of the application is kind of crappy. So you have to figure out how to use the application. You got to open the app. You got to figure out the controls. You pair the phone with the lamp. You got to tap the right buttons to turn it on. You buy another lamp. You have to start all over again. And we haven't even talked about connecting this lamp to other things. They talk about, hey, if you have your Nest, and you can pair your Nest and your Philips Hue together so that when your Nest Protect, so when your fire alarm goes off, your lights flash red, which is really cool and very awesome, but you have to set all that up. And this isn't clearly what the future we want is. Mark Ralston is the co-founder and chief creative officer of Argo Design. He was a frog before that. And I really find this quote interesting. I spent several hours updating the firmware for some light bulbs. They're smart light bulbs, which is cool, but they're still just light bulbs. So he spent several hours updating firmware of a light bulb, which doesn't really sound that great. So what can we do instead? what would be a smarter lamp? Well, to install it, you plug it in, and a message appears on your phone saying you've installed successfully, and letting you know that this lamp has now joined the other lamps in the family room. And that's it. In the evening, since it's dark, the lamp turns on to greet you when you come home, along with what other lamps that you have in the same room, which could be from the same vendors, could be different vendors. After dinner, you sit down in front of the TV and the lamp adjusts its brightness so that you can see the TV better. After you turn off the TV, well, the lamp brightens up a bit again, but it's later, so it's darker, and it doesn't come as bright as it did first thing when you first walked home. And then when you leave the room to go to bed, well, the lamp just turns off. That's it. It's simple. There's a lot of technology implications behind this. You have zero-touch discovery, that the lamp needs to discover and be discovered by other devices automatically. Zero-touch authentication. The lamp needs to recognize who to pair and who to connect with. Multi-vendor integration, so things from multiple vendors work seamlessly together. And all of these problems are being actively worked on. And you have things like Apple's HomeKit, which we'll hopefully hear a lot more about next week. And you have SmartThings and Wink and all of these other standards that are helping, or Brillo and Weave that just got announced last week. So all of these standards are helping that part of the problem. So that's not really not what I'm interested in. That's not really what Chai-Wen's interested in. What we're interested in is the app in the lamp. How does the lamp know that it's my lamp and not my neighbor's lamp? How does it know that it's in the family room and not in the bedroom? How can multiple lights in the family room all join together as a group? So instead of thinking about a lamp as just a device, why can't I start thinking higher level? Why can't I start thinking about lighting or safety? How do we make these applications smarter? How do we make these devices smarter? Because let's be honest, smart isn't easy. You have to put something in your head before you can be smart. We have smart products now, and they go awry. If I forget to switch Netflix from my account to my child's account, instead of getting recommendations for the next episode of Sons of Anarchy, I'm getting recommendations for Scooby-Doo. And it gets even worse when you're dealing with physical devices. So I've heard horror stories of people who have a Nest and a kid will play with the Nest because look, that dial, that's kind of cool. That's easy to play around with. And the next thing you know, you're trying to teach your Nest that no, you don't need to spike up to 90 degrees every Saturday just because that was when my child was playing around with it. Screwed up all the settings. So how do we do this? What's the problem with this? And basically right now, we have a Turing machine. We have sensing and we have acting. It's sensing some input and then it's immediately taking some action on it. And these devices jump to conclusions too easily because there's nothing in their head. And that can get pretty scary. So, we're also not really letting the user participate in this and direct the decision-making process. What we really need to do is insert another step in there and go from sensing to acting to sensing, thinking, and then acting. Just as in nature, we become smarter when our stimuli are not processed immediately by our reflexes, but when we have our prefrontal cortex thinking about it. We're contemplating it, we're not just reacting to it. So what does that mean for an application? That means that we need to understand the context. What is the context that the application is in? Does it really understand it? Now, this is a buzzword that if you watched the Google I/O keynote last week, you heard. Google I/O was kind of an interesting experience for us because there's a chunk of the presentation at Google I/O that was the exact sort of things that we've been saying for months, which was kind of cool and reaffirming, but also kind of scary. But it's not just about understanding the context. It's then about taking the appropriate action and understanding what the appropriateness is. Based off of this context, should I do whatever it is that I think I should? And basically this means that we need to be building apps that are driven by a contextual change. User input is, of course, still part of that. But user input, as you build this, can start to become more implicit. It's not just about the user pressing on a button. The user pressing on a button, and therefore I should take an action, that is a perfectly valid context. And that is something that we still need to pay attention to. But we can now start to think beyond that. We can start to think about changes in sensor readings. Because these devices have a buttload of sensors on them. And not all of our applications are taking advantage of them. Sometimes that's okay, but there are other ways that we could take advantage of them that we don't even think about yet. The passage of time is something else that we would need to, you could start thinking about more. And well, it was an appropriate action to take now, but in 5 minutes from now, it's not going to be an appropriate action anymore. And then there's even more abstract things, like the location of where I'm at, which is important, but the location of somebody else. Because I'm here and you're not, does that change the action that my application should take? Or the absence of an event. I didn't receive a text from my wife at 5 o'clock on Thursday. Should I take a different action because of that? Is that something that we've been thinking about a lot? That's something that we've been working on a lot and trying to figure out how to control that. So it's something that we've been building, and it's something we call Context Hub. And it's a framework that we can drop into the applications that we build and basically start taking advantage of the information that the applications receive, both from user input or from other sensors that we define, and feed that into an event stream. And based off of that event stream, we can define rules to take place of. So what does that mean? What are these event streams? What is this data? So it could be simple things like location and geofencing. It could be proximity, either to a beacon or to NFC if we're on Android, because we have access to NFC on Android. It could be battery level. This is an important action to take, except for the battery's about to die on my phone, so never mind, I'm not going to do it right now. Or speed, or time, or temperature. Because it's great if we can make an application that is contextually aware and can do all this stuff for us, but nobody's going to use it if, as soon as I turn on your application, you drain my phone's battery because you're constantly doing stuff. So we need to be able to know what's going on. We need the state of other devices. Because my phone is sitting next to my computer, does that mean it should take a different action than it before? 'Cause I don't know about you, I've all run into the situation when I'm sitting at my phone, or sitting at my computer, my phone next to me, my iPad next to me, wearing a watch, and suddenly I get a notification on all 4 devices at once. Shouldn't we only get that once at one of the devices because they all know that they're right next to each other? And we can even start pulling in data from public sources like traffic or the weather, or private sources. Like I said, a lot of our work is around the enterprise. So a lot of our work is looking at, okay, how do we take data that is in a server somewhere and make sure that the guy out in the field has access to it? Because he's the one who's going to take action on that data. But if he doesn't have access to it, well, then he can't. So how do we do that? And how can we create a device or create an application that prompts him and gives him that data and gives him that information that he needs to be able to take that action, or even recommend the action or take the action for him, because it's something that could be automated. And then once again, user input, still a very important piece of data, but we can start making interfaces that are more and more implicit. But it's also important that this is bringing in a massive amount of data. So we need to be able to tweak it and turn it off and say, we care about this data for this person at this particular time, but not at that particular time. If you're doing an application that's tracking where people are out in the field, they don't want to be tracked when they're going home. So how do you manage that? How do you regulate that? And how do you basically, what you end up with is you end up with streams of events that drive the experience, not only the UI. So what does that mean from a more practical example? This is an application that we're building right now for a client called Dr. Now that will be, should be launching this summer. It's, if you're from the Houston area, they had a big splash on Fox News about it recently. But basically, it's a concierge medicine application or for scheduling home visits. The pitch phrase is, it's Uber for doctors, because everybody's got to be Uber for something. But basically what it means is, I'm sick, I can't go to a doctor, I need a doctor to come to me. I can pull out this phone and I can say, hey doctor, I have a fever, my throat's kind of sore, come see me. And it sends that information out, and because we have this location awareness, because we're taking advantage of things, we know where you are, we know where the doctors are, we bring this to the attention of the closest doctor that's on call, and they said, yeah, sure, I can come see you. And that's like, that's nice, that's the first step. But then we can also go beyond that, and that now that we know where we are, we know where the doctor is, we can send automatic updates to you as the doctor gets closer. When the doctor's a mile away, we can send you a push notification and say, hey, your doctor's on the way. But if we take that a step further and we go through and say, okay, we know that the doctor is scheduled to come see you at 1 o'clock. We know that the doctor is currently 30 minutes away from you. And we also know that 1 o'clock is 20 minutes from now. Well, clearly the doctor's not going to make it. So let's update you and let you know that your appointment has changed and will now be 1:15. And let's update the doctor on the schedule and remind them, hey, you need to wrap up with the patient that you're talking to because you have another patient waiting. And you can get moving and then they can go. So that's kind of an example of what we're building out right now. And it's a lot of kind of interesting stuff. There's a lot of ways that we wish we could do more, and that's leads us into WWDC of what more do we wish we have access to. Basically, my wish list is small because I don't want to be disappointed and have grandiose visions and ideas, and then it doesn't really happen. But, a watchOS SDK would be nice so that we could write real applications. We've been writing and designing applications on the devices so far, and Claire can attest to how limiting the current UI is, and especially watching the play back and forth between the watch application and the phone application and how long it takes to request data and update the screens. And loading is something that our designers hate, understandably so. And because that kind of breaks that seamless experience. And unfortunately, the Apple Watch SDK as it is now with the extensions, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of ways we can improve that. And but a native SDK would be really great, especially if we have more access to sensors. Because think of how cool you could do stuff with, you had access to a patient's heartbeat. And then suddenly go through and say, hey doctor, you're supposed to be there in 30 minutes and oh crap, the patient's heart just stopped. Hurry up and go. Or that it automatically calls 911 instead and says, hey doctor, never mind. The emergency guys got this because something bad has really happened. And I mentioned heart attacks, and suddenly I get lots more people coming in. So you got to be excited. Better HomeKit integration and access would be great. HomeKit, I think, was the thing that was announced at last year's WWDC that I was the most excited about, because I just bought a new house, and an idea of being able to take my new house and put all of these smart devices in it that would be completely controlled from my phone, and I could whisper "Goodnight Siri," and everything shuts off, and that would be so cool. And where is it? Every update, I keep wait, maybe in this one, no. Every beta, keep reading through the laws, going no. So I really hope iOS 9 that finally happens. I think there's been rumors of having the Apple TV hub that becomes your HomeKit hub, which is exciting because armchair quarterbacking. That's what I said they should do last year as soon as they announced HomeKit. So it's not necessarily a groundbreakingly intuitive leap to think that that's where they're going, but sometimes it's nice to hear validation that your crazy ideas are what their crazy ideas are too. A Siri API, the ability going into that implicit interface that we can control the applications more via voice. And sure, we'll have some central location via Siri that we have to access, but Alexa, the Amazon's Alexa device thing, conceptually is really pretty cool. And having some sort of control with that would be something that would be really interesting to play with a little bit more with Siri. I mentioned NFC earlier, and the Android team at Chai-One is much smaller than the iOS team, unfortunately, because in the enterprise, everybody still goes security, 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 which means iOS, 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 and not really Android, Android, Android. But we always have a lot of work going back and forth talking about what's available on Android that's not available on iOS and vice versa. And NFC is one of them. I mean, when NFC and Apple Pay got announced as part of the iPhone 6 Plus, the Android guys are like, yeah, we've had that 3 years now. And, it's great, but what we're finding is that even if Android has it first, the general market doesn't really adopt interest in it until iOS has it. So I'm always, which is sad for us, because that means we don't always get to play with the cool stuff immediately, because nobody wants it, because it's not an idea until it's an idea from Apple. So really hoping that we get full access. That was something that when the phone shipped and when Apple Pay shipped and stuff like that, everybody realized, oh wait, we don't actually have full access to NFC, and we can't do cool NFC tricks with our phones. That was something that the Android guys are still like, still got you there. I'm really hoping that will change. But it's simple. I'd love to be able to write apps for the Apple TV. I think that if we're doing a new, fancier Apple TV with HomeKit integration and stuff like that, I think it makes more sense, because for HomeKit to work, you're going to end up needing to write apps for the hub. So if you can write some apps for the hub, then why not write all apps for the hub? It's going to be interesting, because I don't know have any of you looked at writing apps for the Apple TV before? I've been to a talk where and kind of looked at some stuff where people are trying to uncompiled iOS on an Apple TV and hacked it and tried to figure it out. It's one mammoth application. When you have the display screen and you select different apps, that's not actually different apps. There is one app that happens to be loading new things, which is why it's clearly has changed more now because we do get these sudden updates with the new application, but it's actually loading a whole new app under the hood, which I think is really interesting. So this is an Apple presentation, or Apple-ish presentation, which means that I can't end the presentation without having one more thing. So, we spend a lot of time about context and contextual awareness and stuff like that, which we spend a lot of time at the office talking about. And one of the big things that comes up when you start talking about context and this idea that your phone is tracking all of these things from your sensors and stuff like that is privacy. We have our accountant is the only person on our staff who has a Windows phone. And on the one hand, she hates being the only person on a Windows phone because she wants to be able to say, hey, check out this app. My company wrote this. And we don't get interest in doing Windows Phone development, so we don't really do any Windows Phone development. But at the same time, she also likes the idea that she's on Windows Phone because that means all of these little toy apps that we're building to do all this contextual tracking and awareness, she does have to put on it, because she's the biggest one who's like, I don't want you to track me. And that's something that you're gonna end up with a lot. And so, if you couldn't already tell from some of my slides, I'm the comic guy of the company. And so, of course, I'm gonna recommend a comic. This is a comic called The Private Eye. It's written by Brian K. Vaughan with art by Marcos Martin and colors by Monsto Vicente. And if you haven't heard any of those names, if you've heard of a book from the 90s or early 2000s, sorry, called Why the Last Man, that was Brian K. Vaughan. It's about a world, post-apocalyptic future where suddenly all men drop dead except for one, and there's a guy and his pet monkey, and so the story of them trying to survive, and what that means, and deciphering the disaster. He also caused all sorts of interesting talk the other year with another story he's doing called Saga, and if you've seen the TV adaptation of Stephen King's Under the Dome. That was a TV series that I don't remember what network. I haven't had actual real cable in 5 years, so I kind of forget what networks do what. Brian K. Vaughan was the showrunner for that and was the lead staff writer. So anyway, The Private Eye it's a we'll call it apocalyptic. It's a future story. That basically is probably about 50 to 60 years in our future. And the general idea behind it is you have today's society where we're putting all of this data up in the cloud and all of these things and all these interconnected devices. And then one day the cloud bursts and all of this data goes flooding out all over the place and all of everybody's deepest, darkest secrets come out. And it's not just the deepest, darkest secrets like, oh, I killed a guy and I'm going to blog about it but never release it to anybody. Or, oh, I'm having an affair. It's the little things like, I do this. I like this TV show that nobody's supposed to like. Or here's my secret concerns and my dreams and my aspirations that I'm never going to share with anybody, but suddenly they're all out there. And so what happens is the society completely shifts and goes from a society where, wow, we're using all sorts of cloud services. We're using the internet. We're using all this great stuff to bring everybody interconnected. There's all this data out into the world where privacy is paramount. And the the press actually become more powerful than the police, because press's goal is ensuring privacy. So what you end up with is this really wacky world where privacy is absolute, which means everybody dresses up in ridiculous costumes all the time so that nobody knows who anybody is. So I can go out into the world and I can do whatever I want. I go to work, I interact with people, and you just know me as the guy, the fish-headed guy. You might know the fish-headed guy's name is Brian, but there's no proof that Brian's my actual name when I go home and take off my mask. But then, you know, you also might not know that when you go to the bar later that night and you're talking to the guy with the lion head, well, that's actually Bob the fish-headed guy, even though he now says his name is Chris. And that's okay, and that's the whole point. And privacy is great. And what you end up with is, you know, there's no internet. But because internet's bad, internet connects people, internet causes privacy concerns and public knowledge. And you end up with a world where the paparazzi, private eye, whose interest is learning about information about people, he's enemy number one. He's the most hated man out there because he's violating this world of privacy. And it's a really interesting commentary because it basically goes through and says, okay, look, what we have right now and where we're going, this whole pre-sharing of all of this information might not be a good thing, but the 100% degree exact opposite isn't that great either. So what you end up with is you end up with libraries that are locked down like Fort Knox, not because the knowledge is bad, but it's bad for you to learn that I just checked in Catch-22. Because if you know that I read Catch-22, well, then that means that you know that I think that that's some catch, that Catch-22. And how bad that might be. And so it really causes an interesting thought experiment to kind of look at and go, okay, so where is that balance between this public exchange of ideas, which is valuable to society, and this idea of privacy? And nothing else, it is extremely gorgeous. And so if you're just like looking at pretty things, I highly recommend it just to look at pretty things. It's actually a really interesting experiment from a publishing standpoint because it's available on panelsyndicate.com. It's only available digitally. It was designed basically perfectly for to be read on a tablet in landscape orientation. It's pay what you want, because I just wanted to see if anybody would be interested. And it's 10 issues. These guys actually made a mint because they found that, you know, some people, sure, aren't going to pay anything for it. But otherwise, some people are going to pay a lot more than, you know, the $2.99 cover price of a regular comic book. It's 10 issues total. It's a really quick read. It's all released right now. I highly recommend it. I've kind of made it every presentation that I do at Chai One for like 2 months straight. I basically ended the presentation going, have you read Private Eye? If you haven't, really do. So I really recommend it. And that's basically all I have. So thank you very much. That's my email address. That's my Twitter. It's Chai One's Twitter. It's, yeah. If you're interested in me talking about comics, then follow me. If you're interested in the ideas that Chai One's working on, follow Chai One. Any questions, thoughts, comments, observations, exclamations?
Could you go back over the power of the media again?
Power of the media.
You were suggesting that the media is actually more powerful now than ever before.
In the comic. So in the comic, basically, what ends up happening is that, you know, the fourth state of the press becomes this recognized institution that is there to ensure privacy. And so the press is the only one who has access to information. So say, for example, if there's a big murder mystery in the comic, okay? And the press are the ones who are allowed to figure out, okay, if I take off the mask, who is this person? They're the ones who actually have access to things like, fingerprinting IDs and stuff like that. Because basically what happens in this world is, instead of like we have now where your record as a minor is court locked, basically your record is public until you hit 18, and then it gets locked down. So then you can go off and do whatever you want, and that's when you get to start wearing a mask, and stuff like that. And it basically kind of really turns a lot of those concepts on its head. Anything else? Yes.
You were talking about context earlier. Would you characterize Apple's continuity and handoff as an example of context, maybe in a narrower sense than what you guys do?
Yeah, I would. Like I said, at Google I/O, there was one slide that was talking about context and something and actions. And I don't remember what the term they used that Google used, but it was synonymous to insights, which is how we talk about it. We talk about context, which gives you insights and that you can take actions on. So it's like, oh, okay, yeah. And Apple's continuity and handoff is the same sort of thing. It's something that you're going to see a lot more. And it's something that we're all really starting to look into now, and I think it's kind of the future of where a lot of apps are going. So continuity and handoff control and more control over those APIs would be something really kind of cool to see. Because right now it's all kind of magic, which is great, but having a little bit more idea of how I can control that and what how things are do handoff would be really cool.
If Apple opens up the APIs to the devices and sensors and the watch and whatever, that's going to allow third-party app developers to be a lot more context aware. That's a message I'm getting from your discussion. Sounds like you guys are already on that, but you're waiting for access to that interface as well. Is that right?
Yeah, especially on the watch, because for example, like location and getting location information from a watch only works if the watch app is in the foreground. Whereas a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, that being able to take action on something without direct user access, that requires location information in the background, so geofencing and stuff like that. For example, we have an application that we use called Concierge. That it's one of the other demos that I kind of do with talks like this. The idea behind Concierge is we all have a Concierge app on our phones at Chai and we have an iPad that sits out at our front desk, and it's basically our Concierge. For a long time we didn't have our admin or receptionist at the front desk, and so the concept kind of basically started as the Jimmy John sandwich guy app. We have a Jimmy John's near Chai that we have Jimmy John's deliveries pretty much constantly, and Jimmy John's guy was wandering in going, "Hey Travis, I need a signature for Travis," because there's nobody at the front desk to tell him. So instead, you walk in and there's an iPad. And it's got my face on it. You can tap on my face and it sends me a push notification and says, "Hey, you have a delivery at the front desk," which is cool. And then what we did is we added this contextual awareness around it so that we have a geofence for the Chai office. And when my phone crosses that geofence, then my face shows up on the iPad at the front desk. And when I leave that geofence, then my face disappears, and you can't send me a message because I shouldn't be getting messages getting deliveries when I'm not in the office. And we basically have it set up so that we can drop locations wherever we want. And it's basically, there's a server-side control to it, so we can actually automatically add a geofence that we care about on the server, and it gets pushed down to everything. So when we opened up the Austin office, and we were just said, okay, this is where the Austin office is now, and concierge just started working. You can actually go through, and the idea would be like we could do a pop-up. I walk in, I open up the iPad, it says, oh, okay, I'm at 701 Brazos now. Cool, that's now in Chai One office. What do you want to call it? Chai One Capital Factory. And boom, done. So a lot of that, that really works if the app is in the background. The concierge app is not on our phones, isn't something that we interact with every day. We install it, we sign in so it knows that this phone is me, and then that's it. We can't do that on the watch today. And when the watch OS SDK comes out, I could easily see that that's still a restriction of the native application, but being able to do, I think there's a lot of other things that we could have access to, like, again, the heartbeat thing that I mentioned is kind of an extreme example. But I think having something where we could have some sort of control over heartbeats and some sort of health and safety. Health and safety is where we get a lot of interest in this, especially in the enterprise space, of being able to go through and how do I automatically notify somebody who's out in the field that, you know what, it's time for you to take a break. You need to go drink some water. We know you haven't come inside for X number of time. You need to take a break. We're working with some companies right now that do industrial services, so repairing boilers and stuff like that, and basically what they call soft skills, which is any sort of craft services in a plant that doesn't require a blowtorch. So it could be building scaffolding, it could be painting, it could be bricklaying, stuff like that. It could be cleaning out these big boilers. And there's restrictions that you're not supposed to be inside of a particular piece of equipment for more than an hour because you have fumes and you have heat and these other safety concerns. So having some sort of automatic system to notify you, especially notify you with a nice tap on your wrist, that'd be kind of cool. Because what we're finding is, especially in the industrial refinery plant space, is that there are places that are class 1 div 2 safety restrictions where you can't take a phone, but a watch that you're wearing underneath your fire retardant equipment is fine. So if we can write a watch app or an Apple Watch that you're wearing under your FREs, then you can still get some of that contextual awareness, and so those contextual applications that open up that you can't, and they can't be able to take advantage of just on a phone.
It's interesting to hear that the Apple TV is just one app.
Yeah.
It's kind of like with the iPhone, when they came out with the first software, in 2007, it worked to where Apple engineers could figure out how to make apps, but all the APIs were really confusing and hard to understand, and so they spent most of the iPhone team spent a whole year just working on making those APIs where third-party developers could actually even be able to use them.
Yeah. So
probably kind of a similar effort would be required for Apple TV.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think Wissam and Claire and I have gotten into these discussions, but I know with some of the other guys on the design team, we've talked about the UI of the Apple TV and this wall of giant buttons. It's the same discoverability problem that we have now, even as they keep adding channels constantly. It's hard to find everything. You have to scroll through. And I was tweeting the other day, I now have HBO Now and HBO Go sitting next to each other on my Apple TV, which, why do I need 2 apps from HBO? Why do I need any apps from HBO? I read the Game of Thrones book, so I'm not bothering to watch the show. I don't know, I'm weird. But, you know, 'cause especially now, because the show's gotten to the point where it's gone beyond the books, now I don't want to watch the show because there will be spoilers for whenever the book finally comes out, when Martin gets his acting gear. But yeah, I think that that whole device is going to change, not just from the actual piece of equipment, but I think that whole software is going to be a different experience, which is kind of exciting, because what I've heard so far is that I've heard a lot of rumors saying HomeKit's going to happen. We're going to get this new Apple TV. We're going to have this. We might have an SDK, but nobody's talking about what is that going to look like yet. Because that's, I think, going to be one of the big reveals if that happens. Any other questions? Yes.
Speaking about context awareness, this really reminds me of iBeacons.
Mhm.
Have you guys done much work with iBeacons?
We do. We do a lot of work with iBeacons. We've worked with a couple of different ones. I think we have sitting at my desk or around my desk, I think I have iBeacons from about 4 different brands. Yeah, it's what's so fascinating about iBeacons is you actually look at the protocol for iBeacons, and it's so simple. You know, it's just, all I'm doing is broadcasting 3 numbers. You know, or okay, a GUID and 2 numbers, but still, that's it. That's all it's broadcasting. There's no real secret sauce behind it. It's just, here's a GUID, here's 2 numbers, and you do have control over changing what those 2 numbers are. But it really opens up a lot of stuff that we can do. So like we've played around with an idea with another version of Concierge that instead of basing it off of geofences, bases it off of iBeacons, and that iPad is broadcasting. And we've done that for like conferences and trade shows where you have the application, and as you get closer to the, we did one for a trade show where you logged in with your LinkedIn profile. And when you got near the trade show booth, your face showed up on this big screen that they had on the booth that was powered by an iPad. And you could then go through and you could open up the application. You could see everybody else around you based off of iBeacons, and come on, say, hey, let's be friends on LinkedIn, or colleagues on LinkedIn. I guess it's not friends. So.
Are there any like major items on like wish lists for future iBeacons? Do you see that being something that Apple's going to continue fleshing out, I guess?
I think that Apple, I'm not sure what else that there is for it. A lot of it's really it's hardware guys getting up to speed on it. I think a lot of the hardware guys have been kind of slow with it. I think the biggest things that you had, things like I had a slide in there that had an Estimo, and what was interesting about the Estimos were like one of the first iBeacons on the market, but you couldn't change the stupid battery. And they basically said, no, don't worry, the battery's going to last for 2 years, and then we're going to have new ones come out by then, and the technology will advance so much that it's going to be cheaper. So it's going to be okay for you to throw that away and buy a new one, which, okay, cool. I guess that cheap disposable technology is good. I don't know, depending on how you feel ecologically. But there's a lot of them. There's some now that are powered, which I think are more interesting. There's a company called Blue Cats that does a beacon that is really kind of interesting because it's a secure beacon. Whereas, if you haven't looked at the iBeacon protocol, like I said, it's a GUID and 2 numbers. And what the Blue Cats beacon does is it encrypts those numbers, and they actually have a sign off back and forth between the application using their SDK and then the beacon before it will unlock and unencrypt and give you the major and minor keys. So having something like that for a security standpoint, where you want to track you want to be able to track some people within the building, or be able to track a particular piece of equipment. That's the fun thing about beacons, is you can stick them on anything and then you can track it. That I want to be able to track where this beacon is, but you don't have the right permissions, so therefore you can't know where that beacon is. That, I think, is where things get interesting. But that's something that people are starting to do without Apple, and I don't really think that's something that Apple needs to control. I think Apple basically came up with the concept and said, go nuts. And we're just really starting to see a lot of those applications. It takes hardware manufacturers more time to catch up than software. Tool up, build stuff. So there was another question in the back that I had one.
Yeah, you talked about Apple Pay and how it's not an idea, but the idea is from Apple. I was wondering what's your idea on where the struggles like Android and Google have with creating market presence. Is it like full branding or bad marketing?
The market, I think the market presence issue on Android is, I think it's regional. And the other thing that you really look at is you look at all the sales numbers, and they go through and say, what, 67% of market share in the US is actually Android and stuff like that. If you look at it just by market share and devices sold and stuff like that, where we don't see that in our work, because like I said, we primarily do enterprise work. And enterprise, if it's B2B, then they'll allow Android devices, but usually much more locked down and with less access than iOS devices. But for most companies, if it's a company provided piece of hardware, if they are buying a phone and giving it to you, then it's usually an iOS device, because they can lock it down and have more control over that. And I don't see that particularly changing, because I think that that's the market that Google is going for with Android is a very different market. The design philosophy behind Android and the openness behind Android is something very, very different than iOS and Apple, that is all very much about controlling the experience. So Apple's devices, you'll always be able to have more control because Apple wants to have more control. But if you go outside of the US in enterprise, then you see a lot more prevalence of Android. We've talked with the same companies that we'll talk to the North American division, and they're like, yes, iOS only. And then we'll end up with a division from Asia or Europe who reach out and say, okay, that application that you just did for North America, we want that, and oh, by the way, it has to be on Android as well. And Android will be the primary use case versus iOS. And so I think as you play more internationally in enterprise, we're going to see much more of that. Other questions? What are you guys excited about hearing at WWDC?
Watch kit stuff.
Yeah, I was really surprised that Jeff Williams kind of pre-announced that was coming, which makes me wonder either, what does that mean? That means something, yeah. Either that means that watchOS is not going to be the big thing, and they're like, yeah, we'll get that out of the way now because we have something even bigger to talk about. The Apple Car, yay! Or whether that means they're kind of saying, yes, there will be something, but then we're going to end up, it's not going to be as much as we expect in this initial release. The problem that I have, that I think a lot of people are going to have when the Apple Watch SDK finally hits, is I don't remember. I know that the original iPhone OS SDK 1.0 was really limited. I don't remember, I can't pick off single things and go, oh yes, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do this, other than like, collection views, stuff like that. Yeah, I know, and so I expect that what we're going to end up with is that we're going to end up with something that's going to be very, very limited because it's 1.0. And I think that there might be an initial reaction that everybody's going to be upset by it and say, oh, we can barely do anything, until you actually sit down and you start doing something with it and you realize, oh, we can do all this stuff with it. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if we can just run the code on the watch, that would be great.
Yeah. On the code, I love gestures a little bit more. We've had some ideas that we've thrown around with going through, because they have that really nice demo where you can draw flowers and send it to your friends and stuff like that. So we know that the watch can have that sort of gesture control that we're used to for the phone. Having a little bit of that would be really kind of nice. So I think there's a lot of interactions that I'm pretty sure will make those two happy.
So, the digital crown.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
That's also just like the same thing as swiping out kind of on
Yeah.
iOS, and it doesn't the phone or the watch doesn't use it while you're in an app for anything else, so it's like free to use.
It's true. That'd be interesting. Anybody else have anything they were really interested in?
force touch and like custom vibration patterns and things like that. I mean, still talking about watch OS, but yeah, I definitely Apple TV kit, right? That's
For everybody who has their Apple Watch, I guess, how many of you guys actually do have an Apple Watch? I saw a handful. Okay. Now that you've had it for a week, 2 weeks, glad you love it, glad you have it, changes the world, you're never gonna look at watches the same way again, or is it a nice piece of technology for you to have because you need it for work?
It's a great start, but it needs a lot of personalization. The defaults to mirroring your settings, but I don't want or need my notifications to look anywhere near the way they do on the phone. So I'm finding myself needing to tweak it.
Is that from how many notifications you get, or how you get notifications?
Well, I mean, you can get the notification either by the haptic vibration or by pop-ups or whatever, but it's just too much. I don't want the phone to bother. I don't want the watch to bother me as often as it's a phone.
Okay.
And it just requires some tweaking. And there's a lot of articles on the internet from the same experience. It's already a very personal device. You're wearing it, and you need to make it even more personal, I think, than the iPhone. So that's been my experience.
For me, it's actually I feel like there's less notifications now, because a lot of the all the notifications I have on I want to see, but a lot of them I can ignore. At least I just need to be aware of them. I don't need to actually act on them. It'll be someone on work commented on some feature we're working on or something. It's good to know it, and I definitely want to know that comment went out. But that way I can have my phone on silent, so I don't have to pull it out. So for me, it feels like there's less notifications now.
Yeah.
Speaking a little bit more about the Apple Watch, the thing I can't wait for is to be able to change the face, able to have access to that. I think that, if you could design your face, I think it was real popular in the App Store.
Do you want to design your own faces, or just control of the complications?
Design your own face. You have these different watches that have different interfaces.
Yeah.
You go to the watch store, all the faces are different.
Yeah.
Right now, Apple only has control of the faces, I believe. But when they open that up to everyone, I think that's going to be
So there's a huge market in watch faces on Android Wear. And our Android developers all are doing Android Wear. So, they were already immediately adding Android Wear applications to the stuff that they're doing. Oh, you can't do that yet? You know, again, another example of, you know. But yeah, no, I think it's going to be interesting. I was surprised. We got a watch for Taiwan, and that basically we have a shared pool of devices that we can use, and then we had a bunch of different people who all got their own watches, and I borrowed the company's watch for the weekend. Of course, arrived on Friday as I'm walking out the doors. Took that with me. Director's privilege, right? And I tried it for the weekend, and I was expected to be, you know, I've kind of been on the fence of the idea of the watch, because I haven't worn a watch for 8 years, and I sit in front of a really nice clock, and I carry around another really nice clock in my pocket, and so I don't really see why I needed another one. And I wore it for the weekend and was like, you know, by the end of the weekend, I'm really going to want it. And by the end of the weekend, I realized, you know, I don't really. I think that might change once the SDK comes out, because I couldn't find with the apps and the interfaces that I had so far, there was no killer feature that made me go, you know what, this is why I will use this, and why I will put up with my wrist being sweaty, and put up with the constant notifications and stuff like that, because I have this one thing. Other than a watch that tells me to stand up all the time, which I use a standing desk as it is. I was the first one in Taiwan to start using the standing desk, and kind of started a standing revolution. And so that doesn't really help me. Yeah.
See, I think with the watch, I think it's a little 50-50. 50% of it being fashion, and the other 50 being technology. So therefore, if you didn't want to watch in the first place, then you know you were 50% out.
Yeah.
Of that. So I think that's where it lies.
I definitely got mine. I've only had it for like 3 days so far, so I'm in the honeymoon phase right now with it. I love my watch at the moment, but I definitely got it with some watch app ideas that I've been wanting to work on to build a development device. But like earlier today, I went for a run, and first, like, I just went across the street and paid for like a Starbucks coffee with the watch without my phone. Like, left my phone, left my keys, like just had my house key. I already had a set of Bluetooth earphones, so like music on a run without my phone. Like, just being able to leave my phone at home sometimes is really nice. So that was a pretty cool experience. And also, like, GPS turn-by-turn navigation is like huge to me right now. Like, it's so much easier to check directions and things.
With the way that it taps on your wrist to turn different directions and stuff like that.
Yeah. So like most of the time I can tell like left or right based off of the vibration pattern, but also like if I need to see the street name or something, like it's so much easier to just like take a glance at the watch versus like pulling out the phone or something. Yeah, so that's been pretty nice.
I could definitely see it also if you happen to live in a city that has good public transportation, or a public transportation person, which, you know, I'm from Houston, we hate public transportation, right? Fourth largest city, and our public transportation sucks. So but I could definitely really see that being an advantage, especially like walking directions, and doing walking directions on your watch, and not having to juggle your phone, you know, and look around like I was having to do when I was trying to walk over here and stuff like that. So. Cool. Well, thank you a lot for.
Thanks, Travis. So we still got about 40 minutes for this room. Next, so the last, I think, 4 or 5 minutes, we've had kind of development companies come in. We had Mutual Mobile talk about WatchKit. We had Handsome talk about how they do their user-centered design stuff. We had Taiwan. I think we had yeah, wasn't there for that one? And so that's kind of been the series we've been running, and now we're kind of done with that series. So the next thing we want to do is, so the July meetup is going to be a show and tell meetup again. And so we're going to have definitely anyone who's working on the apps. We would love for you to present what you've been working on and you know, get some feedback from people here. And then also anything else, you know, developer related, design related, anything like that, anything iPhone. So I'll definitely have a short talk on some of the automated testing stuff I've been working on. Probably going to split that out over a few meetups, but have a little bit ready for next time. And yeah, so that's going to be that. Does anyone have anything today that they'd like to share that they've been working on? Nope. Let's see. There's also another meetup that's kind of related to our meetup. It's the Cocoa Coders meetup. They've been around for a long time, but have mostly been in North Austin. And they've started now doing meetups here at Capital Factory also. So I think they have one next week. And I went to one about 3 weeks ago that was also here at Capital Factory. It's also probably something that most people here would be interested in. It's a little more on the coding side and programming. But if you're interested in that, you can check that out.
For some Whole Foods thing?
Right, yeah. So Whole Foods, a guy from Whole Foods, who I think leads iOS development for their products at Whole Foods. He has organized a Eventbrite for a watch party for WWDC keynote. So that's going to be next Monday at the Whole Food office at their flagship store over on West 6th. So I'll be there. I think it starts at 11:30. So, and I will definitely send out info about that. And it's also on our Facebook group. So if you're not on our Facebook group yet, we have a Austin iOS developer Facebook group. And first thing I did when I found out about that event, I posted it right on there. So that's on there too. So check that out. And I think one thing I like to do here at the meetup is kind of get people in smaller groups and talking about things among each other. So maybe if we get like people in the front right to talk, kind of get to know each other a little bit, back right, back left, and front left. It's a good chance here to meet other people who are interested in the iPhone. So thanks for coming, and feel free to stick around. So, thank you.